The hospital room phone rang 5 times before someone picked up. After 2 months of voicemails, I almost didn't believe it. Then I heard her voice. Not my father's, hers. Victoria said 4 words that rearranged my entire life. "Too late," she said. "He changed the will yesterday." My mouth opened, but nothing useful came out. "I called every day," I said. "I called 63 times. You know I did." Victoria laughed, not a cruel laugh, worse, a satisfied one, like a woman watching a plan come together. "He knows you abandoned him, Kate. He knows exactly what kind of daughter you are." Then she hung up. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone against my ear, listening to dead air, while 63 outgoing calls glowed on my screen. Everyone time-stamped. Everyone logged. 2 months of calling my dying father, and the woman who answered wasn't going to let me say goodbye. "My name is Kate. I'm 34. I'm an ICU nurse, which means I know 2 things most people don't. I know how hospitals work from the inside. And I know that every system keeps records, even the ones people think they've erased." Victoria blocked my number, stole my father's last days, and lied to a dying man about his own daughter. She thought she'd erased me from his life completely. She forgot that I work in systems that never forget. 9:47 that night. I was still standing at my kitchen counter because I hadn't been able to make myself sit down. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness. From the kind of anger that makes everything sharp and clear and quiet. I opened my carrier app and started pulling records. 63 calls to my father's cell phone in 8 weeks. Every single one under 11 seconds. That meant voicemail picked up, I started talking, and the recording cut me off because the inbox was full. Full. Which meant either nobody was clearing it, or someone had cleared it and let it fill right back up with messages they never planned to pass along. 41 text messages, all marked delivered, not one marked read. I scrolled through them in order, and reading them back felt like watching myself drown in slow motion. The first one was gentle. "Dad, I heard about the diagnosis. I'm here. Please call me." The last one was desperate. "Please, Dad, I don't know what I did wrong. Just tell me." Between those 2 messages sat 39 others. Some worried, some angry, some written at 2 in the morning when I couldn't sleep because my father was dying 400 miles away and I couldn't reach him. Every single one delivered. Not one answered. I started screenshotting. Every call, every text, every timestamp. My hands moved the way they moved during a code blue at work. Fast and steady because panic kills people, and I wasn't about to let it kill this, too. I numbered each screenshot by date, saved copies to my cloud drive, backed them up to email. Then I opened my email and searched Victoria's name. The last message she'd sent me was from 11 weeks ago, 3 days before my cousin Angela called to tell me about the cancer. I'd asked Victoria how my father's annual checkup went. Her response was 4 words. "Your father is fine." 4 words. She typed 4 words while my father was getting a terminal diagnosis. She knew. She'd known for at least 3 days before Angela found out through a family friend, and she chose to write, "Your father is fine," while he was being told he was dying. I screenshotted that email too, saved it. Then I went back through 12 years of messages between Victoria and me, and the pattern I'd been too polite to name finally showed its face. Every holiday she told me Dad was too tired for a call. Every birthday she said he was traveling. Every time I suggested a visit, something came up. "He's remodeling the guest room. We'll be at the lake house. Maybe next month he's been under the weather." 12 years of next months. I'd been so careful to respect their space, to not be the difficult daughter from the first marriage, that I'd handed Victoria exactly what she wanted. Distance, and she filled every inch of it with lies. My phone buzzed. "Angela, any luck reaching your dad?" I typed back the truth. Victoria answered. "Says he changed the will. Says he thinks I abandoned him." Angela's reply came in 3 seconds. "That's insane. You call me every single week asking if I've heard anything from him." I stared at that text. Angela knew. My coworker Linda knew because she'd found me crying in the break room twice. My neighbor Beth knew because she'd seen me pacing my driveway on the phone at midnight. My supervisor had 3 denied time-off requests on file, all of them for family emergency travel. Victoria had spent 2 months telling my father that nobody cared about him, but she'd forgotten that the people around me had been watching me care the entire time. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Evidence. Then I started a list called Witnesses. Victoria thought she was the only one keeping records. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about a lot of things. The next morning, I called the hospital's main number, gave my father's name, asked to be transferred to his room. The line rang 9 times. Nobody answered. I called back and asked for the nurse's station on his floor. A woman picked up, sounding rushed. I told her I was Robert Morrison's daughter and asked about his condition. I can only share information with listed family contacts, she said. Let me check. I heard typing, then a pause that lasted too long. I'm sorry, ma'am, you're not on the authorized list. Victoria had removed me, not just blocked my number. She'd gone to the hospital, spoken to someone in admissions, and had my name taken off my own father's contact list. As far as that hospital was concerned, Robert Morrison had one family member. Her name was Victoria. But here's what Victoria didn't know about me. I've worked in hospitals for 11 years. I know that main lines connect to operators who follow scripts. I know that floor nurses are too slammed to have real conversations. And I know that every hospital has back channels that families never learn about, but nurses use every single day. I called the main line one more time. This time, I didn't ask for my father's room. I asked for the hospice care coordination office. When they answered, I gave my credentials. Kate Morrison, registered nurse, license number included. I said I was coordinating end-of-life care planning for a family member and needed to speak with his assigned hospice nurse about transition protocols. Medical language opens doors that tears never will. The coordinator didn't hesitate. She transferred me to the hospice wing and a woman named Rachel picked up. I kept my voice clinical, the same tone I use when I'm calling a pharmacy about a patient's medications. I'm looking for the nurse assigned to Robert Morrison, I said. I'm his daughter and also an RN. I have questions about his current care plan. Rachel went quiet. It was the kind of quiet I recognized from my own work, that half second where someone decides whether to follow the rules or follow their gut. Then she said 2 words that stopped my heart. You're Kate? He told you about me? He asks for you every day. Rachel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Every single day, he begs his wife to call you, and she tells him she tried and you won't come. She tells him you said he was dead to you. The floor tilted under me. My father was lying in a hospice bed 400 miles away, dying, asking for me by name. And Victoria was sitting beside him, holding his hand, stroking his hair, looking him in the eyes and telling him his daughter didn't love him anymore. While 63 of my calls sat rotting in a voicemail box she probably emptied twice. Rachel. My professional voice was gone. Completely gone. I have called 63 times, 41 texts. She blocked my number. She removed me from his contact list. I never said any of those things, not one word. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. I counted them the way I count heartbeats on a monitor. Then Rachel said, I believe you. I've had a bad feeling about this for weeks. She screens every call that comes in. She reads his texts before he sees them. She even takes his phone out of the room when she leaves. Rachel said she couldn't officially help me. HIPAA rules, family authorization lists, all the legal walls Victoria had built between me and my dying father using the system's own paperwork. But she told me one more thing, and it was the detail that broke me open and sealed me shut at the same time. He keeps a photo of you on his nightstand, Rachel said. Your graduation, I think. Cap and gown. She turns it face down every time she visits, and every time she leaves, he reaches over and turns it back up. I pressed my hand over my mouth so Rachel wouldn't hear the sound that came out. My father, too weak to pick up a phone, too sick to fight the woman who controlled everything around him, was still reaching for my picture every single day. That was his rebellion. That was the only thing he had left. I wrote Rachel's name in my evidence folder. Not as a witness yet, as the only person in 2 months who had told me the truth about my own father, and the first person Victoria would try to destroy for it. 2 days later, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. Rachel. Her voice sounded different this time. Tight. Careful. The way nurses talk when they're delivering bad news and trying not to fall apart while they do it. Someone filed a formal complaint, she said. They reported that I disclosed protected patient information to an unauthorized party. I'm on administrative review, effective immediately. Victoria found out we talked. I don't know how. I called you from my personal cell phone, not the hospital line, but the complaint references the exact time of our call, down to the minute. Rachel's breathing was shallow. Kate, I could lose my license over this. If they verify the complaint, I can't work as a nurse anymore. I can't contact you again. I'm so sorry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive 400 miles and walk through the front doors of that hospital and stand at my father's bed where I belonged. Instead, I kept my voice steady, the way I'd want someone to keep their voice steady with me. I understand, and Rachel, this is not over. I promise you that. She was quiet for a moment. He asked for you again this morning? She told him you blocked her number. Then she hung up. Victoria wasn't just a woman who wanted money. She wasn't just a jealous second wife cutting out the stepdaughter. She was someone who would destroy a nurse's entire career, a complete stranger's livelihood, to make sure a dying man never heard his daughter's voice again. That wasn't greed. That was something colder and deeper, and it had been growing in my father's house for 12 years while I politely kept my distance. The cease and desist arrived by certified mail that same afternoon. I had to sign for it, which meant Victoria wanted a paper trail proving I'd received it. The letter came from a law firm called Whitmore & Associates, and the language was surgical. Any further contact with Mr. Robert Morrison, whether direct or through hospital staff, medical personnel, or third-party intermediaries, will result in the immediate filing of a petition for a restraining order. The letter cited harassment of hospital personnel and unauthorized attempts to access protected health information. I read it 3 times. Then I did what I always do when someone hands me a document designed to make me back down. I scanned it, saved it to my evidence folder, and called a lawyer. His name was David Chen, and he was the 3rd attorney I tried. The first 2 told me will contests were expensive, slow, and rarely successful. David asked a different question. He said, "Tell me about the phone records." I told him everything. The 63 calls, the 41 texts, the carrier logs, Victoria answering the hospital phone, Rachel, the complaint, the cease and desist. David went quiet for a long time, and it was the good kind of quiet, the kind where someone is thinking, not the kind where someone is looking for a polite way to say no. "She's building a narrative," he said finally. "Devoted wife, absent daughter, the complaint against the nurse, the cease and desist, these aren't defensive moves, Kate. She's creating a legal paper trail that positions you as the aggressor. She's been doing this for a while." "I know," I said. "That's why I've been building one that tells the truth." David paused again. "Keep building it. People who build narratives this carefully always make a mistake somewhere. They get confident, they overreach, and when they do, the whole thing unravels." He was right. But neither of us knew yet that Victoria's mistake was already sitting in a filing cabinet in her lawyer's office, waiting to be submitted to a judge, and that it would be the dumbest thing she'd ever done. David told me to request my complete carrier records, not the summary from the app, but the full technical report. Call metadata, connection routing, tower logs, everything the phone company tracks but doesn't show customers on the screen. "Carriers keep everything," he said, "and everything is admissible." I filed the request that night, 7 to 10 business days. Meanwhile, David started the preliminary probate paperwork. To contest a will, you need standing, which means proving you're a direct heir with a legal interest in the estate. I sent him my birth certificate listing my father by name. Then I sent him something that made him go quiet on the phone for 10 seconds. My father's original will, from 2014. He'd given me a copy when he first drafted it, back when Victoria was still pretending she and I could be a family. That will left me the house and 60% of his savings. Victoria received the rest, plus his pension. It was fair, it was clear, and most importantly, it was signed before 12 years of isolation had done their work. "If the new will is dramatically different," David said, "and she influenced the change while he was medically compromised, that's textbook undue influence. That's our case." The carrier records arrived on a Thursday morning. I opened the file on my kitchen table and spread the pages out the way I spread patient charts when I'm looking for something everyone else missed. Metadata, routing logs, account activity. And there it was. Buried on page 11 in a column labeled Account Modifications was a single entry that made the last 2 months make perfect sense. 8 weeks ago, 2 days after my father's cancer diagnosis, someone had activated call blocking on his phone for my number. The carrier logged the exact date, the exact time, and the login credentials used to make the change. The account was in my father's name, but the IP address that made the login came from somewhere else entirely. David subpoenaed the IP records. 3 days later, we had the answer. The login came from Victoria's personal laptop, her home Wi-Fi network. Her IP address, registered to her name through her internet provider. She had sat down at her kitchen table, logged into my father's phone account, typed in my number, and pressed block. Then she'd spent 8 weeks standing at his bedside telling him I wouldn't call. Every voicemail I left after that moment never reached his phone. Every text I sent was swallowed by a system she'd rigged. She had built a wall between a dying man and his daughter, and then she'd blamed the daughter for not climbing over it. I sat with those records for a long time. The date kept staring back at me. 2 days after diagnosis, she hadn't waited a week. She hadn't waited to see if I'd come on my own. The moment she learned my father was dying, her very first move was to make sure his daughter could never reach him. That was day one of her plan. Everything else, the lies, the removed contact list, the fake concerned wife routine, all of it was built on top of that one click. David called that evening. "We have enough for a strong undue influence claim," he said, "but I want the records from your father's side too. Her calls, her texts, the messages she was sending while pretending to reach out to you on his behalf. How do we get those?" "Court order, which means filing the contest first, and for that, we need standing." He paused. "Kate, I need to be honest with you. Even if we prove everything, even if we get every record and win every motion, your father might not live long enough to know the truth." I knew that. I'd known it since Victoria hung up that phone. "I know," I said, "but the record will, and the record is what a judge reads." "Good," David said. "Then we file the moment we have standing." What he meant was the moment my father died. Neither of us said it out loud. We didn't need to. Angela called on a Tuesday. I was at work, in the middle of charting for a patient who was recovering from bypass surgery. My phone vibrated in my scrub pocket and I saw her name and I knew. You always know. Something about the way a call from the wrong person at the wrong time of day feels in your hand before you even answer it. "Katie." Angela's voice cracked on the second syllable. "I'm so sorry, he's gone." I walked to the supply closet at the end of the hall and closed the door behind me. "When?" "Yesterday afternoon, Monday, around 3. "And the funeral?" Angela went quiet. The kind of quiet that means the next sentence is going to hurt worse than the last one. "This morning." It was this morning, Kate. She held a private service, immediate family only. My father had been dead for 26 hours. His funeral was already over, and nobody had called me. Not Victoria, not her son Derek, not the minister, not anyone. I found out my father was buried the same way I found out he was dying, from a cousin who heard it from someone else. Angela told me who attended. Victoria, Derek, 2 of Victoria's friends from church, a minister that neither Angela nor I had ever heard of. 5 people and a stranger saying prayers over a man who had 23 years of friends that Victoria had spent a decade keeping away. I leaned against the wall of the supply closet and pressed my forehead to the cold metal of the shelving unit. My father died thinking I abandoned him. He took his last breath, believing that his daughter heard he had cancer, decided he wasn't worth the drive, and never looked back. Victoria had placed that lie on his heart and held it there while his body gave out around it. She gave him that death. She chose it for him. She decided that the last thing Robert Morrison would feel on this earth was the belief that his only child didn't love him. And she did it so she could get the house. I didn't cry. Something had shifted inside me in that supply closet, something that moved from soft to hard and never moved back. Grief was going to come. I could feel it circling, patient and enormous, waiting for me to stop moving long enough for it to land. But not yet. Right now, there was only the work. I called David from my car after my shift. He answered on the second ring. "It happened," I said. "He's gone." She held the funeral this morning without telling me. David was quiet for a moment. Then, gently, "I'm sorry, Kate. File it tomorrow." "Kate, if you need a few days." She buried my father without his daughter present. She blocked my number, lied to him for 2 months, and put him in the ground before I could say goodbye. "File it tomorrow, David. I want her in front of a judge." He didn't argue. "I'll have the petition ready by noon." I hung up and sat in the hospital parking lot while the sky went from gray to dark. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the evidence folder, and created a new tab. I labeled it Fraud. Underneath, I started the timeline. Every date, every call, every lie, laid out in order from the day of diagnosis to the day of death. 71 days. That's how long Victoria had to work. 71 days to turn a dying man against the daughter who'd loved him her entire life. It wasn't enough time to erase 34 years, but it was enough time to make him doubt. And doubt, when you're dying, when you're scared and weak and the only person in the room is the one feeding you lies, doubt is all it takes. I closed the laptop, started the car, drove home in the dark with my jaw locked so tight my teeth ached. The grief was still circling, but I had given it a name now, not sadness, fuel. David filed the will contest on Thursday morning. Victoria's attorney responded in 48 hours. Not a week, not 10 business days, 48 hours. Which meant she'd had her lawyer on standby. She'd been expecting this. Probably since the day she blocked my number. Victoria's response included a stack of exhibits designed to bury me. Character statements from 3 of her friends calling her a devoted wife and describing my father as at peace with his family decisions. A copy of the new will dated 6 days before he died, leaving everything to Victoria and Derek. And one more thing, a set of text message screenshots. David called me Saturday morning. "Come to my office," he said. "Right now, there's something you need to see." I drove 30 minutes with my hands at 10 and 2 and my stomach somewhere near the floor. When I walked in, David had Victoria's exhibits spread across his conference table like an autopsy. He pointed at the screenshots. They were supposed to be messages from me, texts I'd allegedly sent to Victoria over the past 2 months while my father was dying. Horrible things. He's not my father anymore. Don't bother calling me about his condition. You can have everything. I don't want any of it. And the worst one, the one that made my hand shake, tell him I said he's dead to me. My name was at the top. My phone number. The messages were dated across the 8 weeks of my father's illness. If you didn't look closely, if you took them at face value, the way Victoria expected a judge to do, they looked real. They looked like a daughter who had heard her father was dying and decided to twist the knife. But David wasn't looking at the words. He was looking at something else. "Kate," he said, "what kind of phone do you use?" "Samsung Galaxy. I've had Android phones for 6 years. I've never owned an iPhone." David slid one of the screenshots toward me. "Look at the message bubbles. Look at the status bar at the top. Look at the font." I looked, and the room went very quiet. Rounded message bubbles. The specific way the time sat in the top left corner. The signal bar spacing, the exact shade of blue that Apple uses for sent messages. Every single screenshot Victoria had submitted to the court showed an iPhone 14 interface, not Samsung, not Android. iPhone, a phone I have never owned in my life. Victoria had typed fake messages on her own iPhone or someone else's, screenshotted them, and submitted the screenshots to a probate court as sworn evidence that I'd abandoned my dying father. She had manufactured text conversations that never happened, on a device I don't own, with timestamps that didn't match a single outgoing message in my carrier records. And she had signed her name to it, under oath. "She committed perjury," David said. He wasn't smiling, but there was something in his voice I hadn't heard before, certainty, in a probate filing, submitted to a judge, with fabricated evidence attached. "I know," I said. "We had a forensic technology consultant review these this morning. The timestamps on her screenshots don't correspond to any outgoing communication from your actual phone number. Your carrier metadata proves these messages were never sent from your device. The phone model is wrong, the interface is wrong, the data is wrong. Every single thing about these screenshots is fabricated." I sat down because my legs had decided they were done holding me up. Not from shock, from something that felt like the opposite of shock, like the last piece of a puzzle clicking into place so hard you can feel it in your chest. Victoria had been so careful for 12 years. She'd blocked my number without leaving a trace she thought anyone would find. She'd managed the hospital staff, she'd controlled the funeral, she'd hired a lawyer before I even knew to hire one. 12 years of patience, 12 years of quiet, steady manipulation that never left a fingerprint. And then she needed proof. She needed evidence that I was the monster she'd told my father about. And when she couldn't find any, because it didn't exist, she made some. On the wrong phone. The thing about liars is they forget that the truth keeps its own records, and mine were better than hers. The probate hearing fell on a Wednesday. Victoria arrived in a black dress with a strand of pearls and a face full of practiced grief. She looks like a woman who'd rehearsed this in a mirror. Derek walked in behind her in a suit that still had the tag crease in the sleeves and a watch I'd never seen before. Gold and heavy, the kind of thing a man buys when he thinks money is about to land in his lap. They sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. Victoria's attorney, a man in a charcoal tie, kept checking his phone like he had somewhere better to be. Victoria stared straight ahead. She didn't look at me once, not once in 45 minutes. David started with the phone records. He projected my carrier logs on the courtroom screen, 63 calls, each one timestamped, each one showing a connection time under 11 seconds. 41 text messages, every one marked delivered. The judge, a woman named Margaret Hayes, leaned forward and adjusted her glasses. Then David presented the account metadata, the blocked number. The login timestamp from 2 days after diagnosis, the IP address traced to Victoria's laptop through her home internet provider. He walked through it slowly, the way you walk a jury through a crime scene, making sure every detail landed. Victoria's attorney objected. The judge overruled him without looking up. He objected again 40 seconds later. Overruled again. After the second one, he stopped trying. David moved to the next exhibit. Rachel's written statement, 3 pages, signed and notarized. She had submitted it despite the administrative review, despite the risk to her nursing license, despite knowing that Victoria had already tried to destroy her career once. Rachel described my father asking for me every day. She described Victoria telling him his daughter refused to come. She described a dying man crying in a hospice bed while his wife held his hand and lied to his face. She described the graduation photo on the nightstand that Victoria kept turning down and my father kept turning back up. Judge Hayes removed her glasses and set them on the bench. I've been in enough medical depositions to know what that means. When a judge takes off her glasses and puts them down, she's not reading anymore. She's listening with her whole body, and she's angry. Then David played his last card. He put Victoria's fabricated screenshots on one side of the screen and my actual carrier records on the other, side by side. He pointed at the message bubbles. These screenshots, David said, were submitted to this court as text messages sent from my client's phone number. My client has used a Samsung Android device for 6 consecutive years. She has never owned an iPhone. These screenshots display an iPhone 14 interface. He let the silence hold for 3 full seconds. Furthermore, the timestamps on these screenshots do not correspond to any outgoing communication from my client's number. The carrier has confirmed this with complete metadata records. These messages were never sent. They were manufactured on a different device, screenshotted, and submitted to this court as evidence, under oath. Victoria's attorney stood up. Your Honor, we'd like to request a brief recess. Judge Hayes looked at him the way I've seen surgeons look at residents who ask the wrong question during a procedure. No, she said. Sit down. The ruling took less than 10 minutes. Judge Hayes put her glasses back on, which meant she was reading from notes she'd already written. She'd made her decision before David finished his last sentence. The court finds clear and convincing evidence of undue influence in the modification of Robert Morrison's will. The evidence before this court demonstrates a deliberate and systematic pattern of isolation, communication interference, and emotional manipulation of the decedent during a period of extreme medical vulnerability. She paused, looked directly at Victoria. Furthermore, the court finds that fabricated documentary evidence was knowingly submitted in support of the modified will. This constitutes a serious breach of judicial trust. This matter is hereby referred to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of perjury and fraud upon the court. Victoria's face went white, not red, not angry, white. The color people turn when the thing they built starts falling on top of them. The modified will is hereby set aside, the judge said. The original will, executed in 2014, is reinstated in full. Derek made a sound. A small, strangled noise, like someone had squeezed his windpipe. I learned later that he'd already bought a 32-foot fishing boat using a personal loan he'd taken against his expected inheritance. Put down a deposit and signed a financing agreement before the will was even through probate. That boat got repossessed 6 weeks after the hearing. The loan stayed. Victoria's attorney was packing his briefcase before the judge finished speaking. He didn't shake Victoria's hand. He didn't look at her. He walked out of the courtroom like a man leaving a building that was on fire. Victoria sat perfectly still. Her fingers were wrapped around her pearl necklace, squeezing so tight the strand looked like it might snap. She still hadn't looked at me. She wouldn't look at me ever again. 3 weeks later, I held a real memorial for my father. Not the rushed 5-person service Victoria had staged. A real one. I spent a week tracking down people who'd known my father before Victoria erased them. His college roommate, his old co-workers from the engineering firm, friends from the neighborhood where I grew up. People who hadn't heard from him in years because Victoria had told them he was sick and didn't want visitors. 23 people came. 23 people who loved Robert Morrison and had been told in one way or another that he didn't want to see them. Some of them didn't even know I existed. Victoria had told them my father was childless. After the service, a man named Paul found me. He'd been my father's college roommate. He was holding a small photograph and his eyes were red. "I thought you should have this," he said. It was a picture of my father at my college graduation. He was standing in the back of the auditorium away from the stage, wearing the brown corduroy jacket he'd had since I was a kid. He was smiling. On the back, in his handwriting, 4 words: Kate's graduation, proudest day. Victoria had told me he didn't come. She told me he had a work trip that weekend, that he was sorry, that he'd make it up to me. I walked across that stage believing my father didn't care enough to show up. And the entire time he was standing in the last row, too far back for me to see, because Victoria had told him I didn't want him there. She spent 12 years convincing a dying man that his daughter didn't love him. It took me 3 months to prove I never stopped. The phone records don't lie, the carrier logs don't lie, the IP address doesn't lie, and the photograph in his wallet, the one he carried for years where nobody could see it, that doesn't lie either. If you stayed through this whole story, I want you to know that means something to me. Not everyone will sit with someone else's truth for this long, but you did. That's what Betrayal Answered is about. Every lie gets exposed. Every betrayal gets answered. Sometimes by a courtroom, sometimes by a phone record, sometimes by a photograph you didn't know existed. If that sounds like something worth coming back to, just hit subscribe. I'll be here, and the truth will keep winning.